Hey everyone, diving in with you again today. We're tackling a figure who, well, she never seems to fade from intrigue, does she? Eva Perón. You know, Evita, the woman
Mhm.
who went from Argentine actress to like this political force captivating a
A
nation.
force of nature, some might say.
Right. And you sent over some super interesting material on her, specifically looking at Eva through the lens of, have you ever heard of this, the Enneagram?
Oh, absolutely. It's a fascinating system.
Yeah, it focuses on different personality types, and this deep dive is going to zero in on type 2, the helper. So are you ready to unpack this with me and see what makes Evita tick?
I'm ready. It's always so fascinating to apply these personality frameworks like the Enneagram to historical figures,
Yeah.
especially someone as complex as Eva Perón.
Right, like using a new type of lens to get a clearer picture.
Yeah.
So for those who haven't bumped into the Enneagram yet, what are we even talking about when we say a type 2, this helper?
Well, at their core, Type 2s are driven by this deep need to be loved and appreciated. They're the ones always there for others, showering them with generosity, empathy. They thrive on feeling needed and valued, which is exactly where the video starts to draw parallels with Eva Perón, especially when you think about her tireless work with Argentina's poor and underprivileged.
It's like her famous work establishing the foundation, Eva Perón, right? Providing aid, healthcare, housing. It was a massive undertaking, and the video really highlights this as like classic helper behavior.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it goes even deeper than that. The video argues that Eva wasn't just going through the motions. She truly craved that adoration from the Argentine people. Their love fueled her desire to help and validated her role as their protector. It was this fascinating reciprocal relationship.
Okay, so genuine care on her part, but maybe also a need for that love in return. Because the video doesn't shy away from the potential downsides of this personality type either. It brings up the idea that some type 2s in their, I don't know, eagerness to be needed might turn to manipulation. That's kind of a tough pill to swallow when you think about someone so revered.
It's true. And the video poses this really interesting question. Did Eva, consciously or not, use her charisma and position to influence the masses? Did she leverage their love and dependence to gain power, maybe even for herself and her husband?
That's a heavy accusation. It makes you think about her motivations on a whole other level.
Absolutely. And to be fair, the video emphasizes that this isn't about painting Eva as purely manipulative. It's more about diving into the psychology behind it. Imagine constantly needing reassurance that you're loved, that you're enough. That could lead to a deep fear of being cast aside, of no longer being useful. The need to control situations to stay relevant can almost become a way to protect yourself, even if those methods aren't ideal.
So good intentions, but maybe some missteps along the way.
Exactly. And this is where the video throws in a real curveball with this concept of a passion satellite, which is like this secondary driving force within each Enneagram type. For type 2s, the passion satellite is ambition. So it argues that Eva's drive wasn't just about helping, it was about doing it on a massive, impactful scale.
It's fascinating that you say that because the video even traces this ambition back to her early acting career. This was a woman who came from very little, but always had these big dreams. She craved a spotlight, even back then, which makes me wonder.
If her acting career was the early stage for her desire to lead and be seen. Because here's where it gets really interesting. The video suggests that Eva's ambition, her climb to influence, wasn't just personal, it was directly tied to her desire to help. It's like she believed that the more power she gained, the more effectively she could champion the underprivileged and, in turn, receive even more love for it.
Okay, so ambition fueled by compassion. Now that's a power combo, and we see that play out in a big way when she enters the political scene. The video even draws a fascinating parallel between Eva and other historical figures like Catherine I of Russia, referring to them as the power behind the throne.
That's a really astute observation. And when you look at it through the Enneagram, it makes sense. Eva might not have held a traditional political office, but her influence on her husband's regime and Argentine society was undeniable. Think about it. She shaped social policy, swayed public opinion, and impacted major decisions, all without officially holding the reins.
It's almost like she understood instinctively how to navigate the power dynamics, even from the sidelines.
Which, if we're looking through that type 2 lens, makes total sense. Type 2s are often incredibly gifted at reading people. They just get what makes others tick, what they need to hear. The video even talks about Eva's, mastery of this in her public speeches and radio addresses. Apparently her rhetoric was fiery, full of passion, especially when she spoke about social justice.
It makes me think about those iconic images of her visiting hospitals and orphanages, handing out food and clothing directly to those in need. It wasn't just policy for her, it was personal.
Absolutely. And those images weren't accidental. They were carefully constructed to showcase her compassion, to connect with the working class on like a visceral level. It's no wonder they adored her, calling her Evita, their little Eva, a term of endearment that really speaks volumes about the bond she had forged.
But here's the thing, right? The video doesn't shy away from the strategic brilliance of it all either.
Hmm.
While Eva was undoubtedly doing good work, the foundation also served to, consolidate her own power base. It made her indispensable to millions.
Exactly. And that's where that potential duality comes back into play. Genuine compassion intertwined with a keen understanding of how to leverage resources and solidify her position. It's like we're seeing both the light and shadow sides of that helper archetype.
It's so complex. But the video doesn't stop there. It takes it a step further, even drawing a parallel between Eva's approach to social welfare and the tactics of, well, populist leaders throughout history.
Right. It's not about saying it was right or wrong, though. It's about understanding the complicated web of motivations at play. Because if we're being honest, haven't there been plenty of leaders who've used similar tactics, for better or worse?
Totally. And the video argues that Eva was a master at playing to those deep-seated desires, using her platform to ignite their passion and turn it into support for her husband's policies.
She was a natural storyteller, weaving narratives that resonated with people's hopes and frustrations. And because she presented herself as one of them, someone who understood their struggles firsthand, her words carried even more weight. It created this powerful sense of us versus them, with Eva as their fearless leader.
It's almost like in that role of the people's champion, her public persona and the adoration she receives started to, I don't know, shape her own sense of self. It makes you wonder where Eva Perón ended and Evita began.
That's such a fascinating and maybe even a little bit tragic point. If your entire self-worth hinges on external validation, on the applause of the crowd, it can be almost impossible to separate your true self from the image you've created.
And the more she played the role of the savior, the more she needed that validation, that adoration, just to feel whole. It's almost heartbreaking in a way. This woman who dedicated her life to helping others, driven by this deep-seated need to be loved, but potentially losing herself in the process.
It's a powerful reminder, isn't it?
Yeah.
Even with the best intentions, even when we're driven by a desire to help others, we have to be careful not to lose ourselves in the process.
Mm.
That need for validation, that desire to be loved, can be a powerful motivator, but it can also lead us down some tricky paths.
It really makes you think, doesn't it, about the fine line between wanting to make a difference and needing to be needed. But even with all this complexity, with all these different layers to her personality, the Enneagram gives us this fascinating framework for understanding Eva.
It's like we're seeing how those seemingly contradictory parts of her, the compassion, the ambition, that need for control, might all stem from those core motivations of a type 2.
It doesn't give us all the answers, of course, but it does make you appreciate the complexity of her story, the interplay between her desire to help and her need for validation.
Absolutely. And it reminds us that history is rarely black and white. There's so much nuance to these figures, these icons we read about.
And speaking of nuance, this whole discussion about Eva Peron and the Enneagram, it's not just about understanding the past, is it? It makes you think about how we see the world today, how we judge the motivations of leaders and influencers.
Doesn't it?
Mm.
Because, I mean, aren't there so many parallels? Think about the people we admire, or even criticize for that matter, those who hold positions of power. How often do we really stop and consider the why behind their actions?
Right. We tend to put people into these neat little boxes, hero or villain, selfless or selfish. But what if it's always a bit of both? What if even the most ambitious among us are driven by some desire, even subconsciously, to, I don't know, leave the world a better place?
This whole deep dive into Eva Peron and the Enneagram really highlights that complexity, don't you think? It's tempting to judge her based solely on her actions. But when we factor in those core motivations, that deep-seated need to be loved and valued, it paints a more, how do I put it, a more nuanced picture.
It makes her more human,
Right.
more relatable even. And it makes me think, what if we all try to apply this same lens to our own lives? What if, instead of jumping to conclusions about the people we encounter, we took a moment to consider their why?
That's a powerful thought, because understanding those motivations, even if we don't agree with someone's actions, can completely change how we interact with them. It can breed compassion, empathy, and maybe even help us build stronger connections.
Absolutely. It's like that quote from Maya Angelou, people will forget what you said, People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And understanding those underlying motivations can really change how we make people feel. It allows us to connect on a deeper, more human level.
It's a good reminder that there's always more than meets the eye, both in history and in our own lives. And sometimes the most enlightening discoveries come from asking those unexpected questions, from looking at things through a different lens.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So, as you continue to explore the life and legacy of Eva Perón, and as you encounter those fascinating, complicated figures in your own world, remember this: keep asking those why questions. Keep searching for those deeper motivations. You never know what you might discover about them and about yourself. That's all for today's deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those insightful sources coming.